Hello everybody. If you want all the story's content in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. As you all know, AI is getting better and better all the time, and I have to say, this story is one of the most thought-provoking stories that I have read in a very, very long time. I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Short Story 862, The Temporary Office. Advanced. When Daniel Mercer arrived at the Government Records Building on Monday morning, he believed he would stay there for only 2 weeks. The email from the employment agency had been brief: a temporary administration role, good pay, no experience required. The building stood beside the river in Birmingham, behind a row of modern apartment blocks and expensive cafes. Daniel had walked past it many times without noticing it. The structure itself was plain grey concrete with narrow windows and no sign outside, except the number 18 beside the entrance. With narrow windows and no sign outside except the number 18 beside the entrance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and cleaning chemicals. A woman with silver glasses met him at reception. "You are the replacement?" she asked. "I suppose so," Daniel replied. She studied him for a moment before handing him a plastic identity card. "4th floor, Mr. Baxter will explain everything." The lift doors opened onto a long corridor lined with metal cabinets. Daniel expected noise, conversations, ringing telephones, perhaps the usual office complaints about deadlines and broken printers. Instead, the floor was almost silent. Only 3 people worked there. A thin young man typed continuously at a computer near the far wall. An older woman sat beside stacks of folders, stamping papers with slow mechanical movements. At the end of the room stood a tall man in a dark suit. "Daniel Mercer?" the man asked. "Yes. I'm Graham Baxter." His voice was calm and flat, as though he had delivered the same sentence thousands of times. Baxter showed Daniel to a small desk near the windows. "You will organize archived correspondence," he explained. "Nothing difficult. Read each letter, enter the reference number into the database, then place the file into the correct cabinet." Daniel nodded. That sounded simple enough. The first few hours passed quietly. Most of the letters were ordinary government complaints, parking fines, tax disputes, requests for permits. Daniel worked steadily, grateful to have found employment after several difficult months. Shortly before lunch, he opened a folder labelled Priority Review. Inside lay a handwritten letter dated 11 years earlier. It began, "To whoever finally reads this, if my prediction is correct, I will already be dead when this reaches your desk." Daniel smiled slightly. Someone with an imagination, he thought. He continued reading. The writer claimed that several fatal accidents across the country had not been accidents at all. According to the letter, a department inside the government selected individuals whose death would create social balance. Some people were removed because they would later commit crimes, others because their survival would cause economic problems. The writer insisted that the department kept detailed lists of future events. Daniel almost laughed. It sounded like the plot of a cheap film. Still, he finished the letter before placing it aside. At lunch, he carried his sandwich to the break room where the older woman sat drinking tea. "Interesting place," Daniel said. She looked at him carefully. "You opened one of the review files." It was not a question. "Yes, strange material." The woman stirred her tea slowly. "Do not become too interested in those files." Daniel smiled politely. "I do not believe conspiracy theories. That is not what worries me." Before he could ask what she meant, she stood and left the room. That evening, Daniel returned home unsettled without understanding why. The letter itself had been ridiculous, yet something about the office atmosphere disturbed him. Nobody laughed, nobody chatted casually. Even the computers seemed unusually old, disconnected from the modern world. On Tuesday afternoon, Baxter approached his desk. "How are you settling in?" "Fine," Daniel replied, "although some of the documents are unusual." Baxter gave a small nod. "People say many strange things in writing. Most of it means nothing." Then he walked away. Later that day, Daniel opened another review file. This one contained newspaper clippings concerning a bridge collapse in Liverpool. 23 people had died. Attached to the reports was an internal memo dated 3 weeks before the disaster. Expected structural failure acceptable within current projections. No preventative action recommended. Daniel stared at the sentence. There had to be some explanation. Perhaps engineers had calculated the risk incorrectly. Governments ignored warnings all the time. Yet the phrase "acceptable within current projections" troubled him deeply. He searched for more files. Several contained similar material: predicted factory fires, financial crashes, riots, epidemics. And beside many documents appeared the same signature: Graham Baxter. By Wednesday, curiosity had replaced caution. During the afternoon, Daniel waited until the others left for a meeting downstairs. Then he walked to the locked cabinets at the end of the corridor. Most drawers were secured electronically, but one had been left slightly open. Inside were thick black folders marked only with years. Daniel hesitated before removing the first file. His hands became cold as he opened it. The documents inside described future events in precise detail: elections, transport disasters, assassinations, economic collapses. One page contained hundreds of names. Beside each name appeared a date. Some dates had already passed. Daniel recognized one immediately: his brother, Matthew Mercer. Date of death, 14 September 2025. Matthew had died in a motorway collision 8 months earlier. Daniel's mouth went dry. He turned more pages desperately. Every event listed before the present day had happened exactly as described. Footsteps echoed suddenly in the corridor. Daniel pushed the folder back into the cabinet just as Baxter entered the room. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Baxter closed the cabinet drawer carefully. "You should not access restricted material," he said quietly. Daniel forced himself to remain calm. "What is this place?" Baxter studied him with unreadable eyes. "A management office." "For what?" "For consequences." Daniel laughed nervously. "That explains nothing." "No," Baxter agreed, "but full explanations rarely improve matters." Daniel stepped backwards. "The files predict deaths. They record probabilities. My brother was listed." Baxter remained silent. Rage rose suddenly inside Daniel. "You knew he would die." "We knew it was highly likely." "And you did nothing." Baxter's expression did not change. "If we interfered with every tragedy, civilization would collapse beneath its own weight." "That is insane." "Perhaps, yet society continues functioning." Daniel could barely breathe. "You let people die." "People always die," Baxter replied. "Our task is deciding which disasters must be prevented and which must be permitted." The words sounded so calm, so reasonable, that they frightened Daniel more than shouting would have done. That night he could not sleep. Again and again he pictured Matthew laughing at family dinners, arguing about music, complaining about traffic, ordinary memories, ordinary life, reduced to a line inside a government folder. By Thursday morning, Daniel had made his decision. He would copy the files and expose everything publicly. Surely no newspaper could ignore evidence like this. He waited until evening. One by one the workers left the office. At last, only Baxter remained, seated alone near the far wall. Daniel pretended to organize paperwork while watching the clock above the corridor. At 7:30, Baxter stood, collected his coat, and walked towards the lifts. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night." The lift doors closed. Daniel moved immediately. He opened the cabinet, removed several folders, and photographed page after page with his mobile phone. Future bombing in Manchester, ministerial poisoning, international banking failure, pandemic response projections. Then he found a thin folder labeled Mercer, Daniel. His stomach tightened. Inside was a single sheet. Subject displays elevated curiosity and emotional instability following sibling termination event. Probability of disclosure attempt 93%. Recommended outcome: controlled removal before public dissemination risk escalates. Projected date: 23rd of May 2026. Daniel stared at the final line. Projected time: 2045. Slowly he checked the time on his phone. 2043. The office lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room except for the weak emergency lighting along the corridor. Daniel heard the soft sound of footsteps behind him. He turned sharply. Baxter stood beside the cabinets. "I was hoping the probability models were wrong," Baxter said. Daniel backed away. "You planned this?" "No, we anticipated it." "You're going to kill me." Baxter sighed faintly. "You must understand the process. I'm not here to kill you." The emergency lights flickered, then Daniel smelled smoke. At first it was faint, then stronger. Baxter looked towards the ceiling calmly. "Electrical fire," he said, "3rd floor, according to projections." Daniel heard distant alarms beginning somewhere below. "You knew this would happen?" "Yes." "Then why stay here?" Baxter gave a tired smile. "Because my file is upstairs." For the first time, Daniel saw genuine emotion in the man's face. Not fear exactly, acceptance. Smoke drifted beneath the office doors. People shouted somewhere in the building. Daniel ran towards the corridor, but Baxter caught his arm. "If you leave now, others on the stairwell die." The models were very clear. Daniel pulled free violently. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect nothing." The alarms screamed louder. Daniel hesitated. Every instinct demanded escape. Yet Matthew's death returned suddenly to his mind, acceptable within current projections. Was this how it always happened? People convincing themselves that sacrifice was necessary? Baxter spoke quietly. "There are 82 people still inside this building." Daniel looked towards the emergency stairs, then back at Baxter. For one long moment, neither moved. Finally, Daniel grabbed the nearest fire extinguisher and ran towards the smoke. The next 20 minutes became confusion and heat and noise. Daniel guided office workers through dark corridors, forced open jammed doors, and helped an elderly cleaner down 6 flights of stairs while smoke thickened around them. Outside, fire engines crowded the street beside the river. Paramedics treated injured workers on the pavement. Daniel sat against a concrete barrier, coughing violently. A firefighter approached him. "You were on the 4th floor?" Daniel nodded weakly. "Did you see another man up there? Tall, grey hair?" Daniel looked towards the burning windows above. Flames moved behind the glass like orange water. "No," he said after a long pause. "I did not see him." Hours later, after giving statements to the police, Daniel walked home alone through silent streets. His phone still contained photographs of the files. At a bridge crossing the river, he stopped beneath the cold yellow lights and looked at the water below. Then, one by one, he deleted every image. Perhaps the files were genuine. Perhaps they were madness. Perhaps the future could be predicted. Or perhaps people simply became monsters when they believed they understood it. Daniel finished deleting the final photograph and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Behind him, far across the city skyline, smoke still rose into the night. If you learned a new word today, please make sure to subscribe so you can practice again next time. Vocabulary notes. Unsettled, meaning feeling nervous, uncomfortable, or emotionally disturbed, often without fully understanding why. Example, that evening, Daniel returned home unsettled without understanding why. In this sentence, Daniel feels disturbed by the strange atmosphere and mysterious documents in the office. Even though he cannot fully explain his feelings, something about the situation is troubling him deeply. Similar words: uneasy, disturbed, troubled, anxious, uncomfortable. Extra example: after hearing footsteps behind her in the empty corridor, Priya felt unsettled for the rest of the evening. Interfered, meaning became involved in a situation in order to influence or change what was happening, often in an unwanted or forceful way. Example, if we interfered with every tragedy, civilization would collapse beneath its own weight. Here, Baxter means that if the organization tried to stop every disaster or death, society would become impossible to manage. Similar words: intervened, interrupted, intruded, involved oneself, meddled. Extra example: the teacher refused to interfere with the argument because the students needed to solve the problem themselves. Projected, meaning estimated or predicted in advance, especially using calculations, data, or planning. Example, projected date 23 May 2026. The organization had calculated or predicted the date on which Daniel would probably attempt to reveal the truth. Similar words: predicted, estimated, forecast, expected, anticipated. Extra example: the company announced that its projected profits for the following year were much higher than expected. Hesitated, meaning paused before doing or saying something, usually because of uncertainty, fear, or doubt. Example, Daniel hesitated. This moment is important because Daniel is torn between escaping the burning building and helping the people still trapped inside. Similar words: paused, faltered, wavered, delayed, doubted. Extra example, Amir hesitated before signing the contract because he was unsure whether he trusted the organization. Dissemination, meaning the act of spreading information, ideas, or knowledge to many people. Example, recommended outcome, controlled removal before public dissemination risk escalates. In the story, the organization fears Daniel will spread secret information to the public. Similar words: distribution, circulation, spreading, broadcasting, publication. Extra example, the internet allows the rapid dissemination of news across the world. Story written by ChatGPT. Image created by ChatGPT. To read, see all the story's content in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. CC Music, drifting at 432 Hz, Unicorn Heads.